Hi, this is PJ and Hannah, and the video is edited by Wen Tao, and we are going to be presenting or giving a little video introduction to the history of the Kingdom of Naples, also known as the Kingdom of Sicily briefly when the French owned it, but we'll get into that. So, first off, all began with the Normans when they were the first to bring political unity back to southern Italy. Once Byzantine Empire didn't had failed to reconquer and reclaim all of it, the Normans brought about a couple of important systems. They brought about the feudal system of government and made Naples into like a real major city center on an international scale with like a very agriculturally focused society. Eventually, though, the region became inherited by Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II through a series of marriages and other things, and it divided the peninsula into two, as we know from the division between the struggle for power between the papacy and the emperor. And in 1266, then the Pope requested assistance from the French House of Anjou to try to lay claim to more of those southern states, like Naples. And the Angevin line from the House of Anjou established a dynasty in that capital city of Naples, ensuring that the Guelph would control that area. However, the citizens of the area weren't exactly too fond of being ruled by a foreign dynasty, which sparked a centuries-long struggle for power, beginning with the Sicilian Vespers in 1282. This was a rebellion that happened against the rule of Charles I, who was the ruler of the French Angevin regime on the island of Sicily. There was a lot of unrest because all of the nobles didn't like their subordinate role in Charles's empire, and Sicilian nobles had no share of the government of their own island, and they were taxed heavily. So there's a big uprising, and eventually, after the uprising, Charles was driven out of Sicily by the Aragonese, who were of a Spanish kingdom, and but despite being driven out, Charles' Angevin successors maintained a claim to Sicily and warred with the Aragonese until 1373, when Queen Joan I of Naples formally renounced the claim. However, the struggle for possession of the Kingdom of Naples still continued until 1442, when Alfonso the Magnanimous conquered the whole southern part of the peninsula, bringing it under Aragonese rule.
Yeah, so as PJ just mentioned, the Crown of Aragon began in 1442 with the conquer that was done by Alfonso the Magnanimous. And this led to an Angevin-led Naples. So Alfonso and the Aragonese rule led this region in what was kind of a reconstruction. And they're also thought of as Renaissance leaders who brought Renaissance values and ideas to Naples. Um, so part of this was that the new dynasty and Alfonso connected Naples to the Iberian Peninsula, which allowed Naples to be a pretty prominent player in this Renaissance era in Italy. Um, and an example of these Renaissance ideals of Alfonso was his commitment to the arts. He was really fond of classical literature, and upon his arrival to the city in 1443, he constructed on the castle there an arch which still stands today. Um, so even despite his successes as a Renaissance leader, Alfonso led a harsh regime and enforced his laws on the people of Naples really strictly. And this was in part because he faced some of the same issues that the previous French rulers had, which was that he was a foreigner to Naples, and the people local to southern Italy did not want to listen or be under the rule of foreigners. So to deal with this, he used both his own army and mercenary soldiers to control the locals, and led, again, kind of a harsh regime. So later, as he was nearing his death, Alfonso had no legitimate heir because he'd had no legitimate children. And he realized that if he didn't appoint an heir before his death, the papacy and the House of Anjou would be able to take over Naples once again, which he didn't want. So to prevent this from happening, he chose his illegitimate son, Ferdinand I of Naples, also known as Ferrante, as his heir.
Now, Ferdinand was unpopular with most people, and he didn't have a good reputation because he was illegitimate in two ways. He was an illegitimate son, and he was also an illegitimate leader to the people. So basically, everyone at this point was trying to take him down, but he was very adamant about trying to control and keep his seat of power. So what ended up happening was the papacy continued to grow more and more hostile towards Ferrante, and Ferrante realized that if he wanted to keep his seat, his throne, that he would just have to revert to doing the Pope's bidding. So Ferrante, with his super strong army, agreed to cooperate with the Pope and be the Pope's sword in a sense. And so now, at the same time, all the stuff with the Medici family and Lorenzo was happening in Florence, and the Pope was not happy with that, and he wanted to kill Lorenzo. But so what he ended up doing was he ordered Ferrante's army to go to Florence and crush Lorenzo. At the same time, though, Lorenzo literally went straight to Naples and took a diplomatic approach, talked to Ferrante, and convinced him not to yield to the Pope's wishes, and so Ferrante ended up withdrawing his army in 1478. And lastly, something happened. Ferrante ended up dying in 1495, and upon his death, French King Charles VIII briefly conquered Naples after Ferrante's death, but it was short-lived since the Aragonese ended up returning to power in 1501. So that is all we have. That is the information we have for our podcast. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot to Wentao for editing the video. Really appreciate it. And yeah.